Hi, so the book that I'm going to be book talking that has been really influential to me is Looking for Alaska by John Green. It's a nonfiction young adult novel, and to start it off, I'm just going to read a small passage. After a fast, if reckless, 3 miles to McDonald's, we ordered 7 large French fries to share, and then went outside and sat on the lawn. We sat in a circle around the trays of fries, and Alaska taught class, smoking while she ate. Like any good teacher, she tolerated little dissension. She smoked and talked and ate for an hour without stopping, and I scribbled in my notebook as the muddy waters of tangents and cosines began to clarify. But not everybody was so fortunate. As Alaska zipped through something obvious about linear equations, stoner/baller Frank Walston said, Wait, I don't get it. That's because you have 8 functioning brain cells. Studies show that marijuana is better for your health than those cigarettes, Hank said. Alaska swallowed a mouthful of French fries, took a drag on her cigarette, and blew smoke across the table at Hank. I may die young, she said, but at least I'll die smart. Now, back to tangents. So this small passage actually had a lot of foreshadowing in it because Alaska Young, the main character of this book, actually dies in around the middle of the book, I would say. And her character is just so complicated because you can't really tell whether she's telling the truth a lot of time or if she's just trying to protect herself, and she doesn't really like to show her emotions, so it's kind of hard to tell whether she's actually telling the truth. And I just think it's really interesting. So the other main character in this book who has a really big crush on Alaska is Pudge, and which is his nickname. His real name is Miles, and he also has a roommate whose nickname is the Colonel. And after Alaska dies, Pudge and the Colonel actually take it upon themselves to figure out what the last few moments and what the events leading up to Alaska's death actually were. So it kind of takes us through the journey before everything happens, so we can kind of get to know all of them, and then after, all of a sudden, it's just them trying to figure out what happened to her. And that's actually how the whole novel split out. All of the chapters before she dies are labeled before, 100 days before, and then all the ones after are 4 days after. So it's just, and it's a book that kind of leaves you guessing. You don't really get to know everything in the end, and it's definitely a novel that doesn't give you the ending that you wanted, which is something that changed my mind, changed my understanding of books altogether, because I realized that, sometimes writers do try to trick you and do try to make things really upsetting for you. And I actually really liked the book a lot more because of that. And yeah, I really liked this book, and I think that the ending is something that really influenced me as well, as I said before, but not only because it leaves you guessing, but because it's just so weird and you kind of just have to think about it. It's one of those books that you just kind of have to stare at the wall and really think about for a couple minutes to comprehend everything that you just read, because you really don't get it the first time. And I've read it a couple times, and every time I read it, it's different. And so I really do think I could read this book just for the rest of my life, and every single time I would just understand things in a different way. And there's a lot of symbolism in it. And I think that along with symbolism, there's a lot of motifs, and one of the big motifs is death, and kind of talking about death in a different way than everybody else does. The characters in the book, especially Alaska, aren't afraid of death, and it's not something that's super scary to them. For example, Pudge, one of the main characters, has this weird obsession with last words and learning and memorizing a bunch of famous people's last words. So, for example, one of the ones that Alaska taught him was Simon Bolivar's, and it was, "How will I ever get out of this labyrinth?" And this is something that Pudge actually keeps thinking about over and over in his head after Alaska dies. And it just ties into everything and the theme of the novel and the plot, and it's just everything kind of comes together at the end, and you're just left so mind-boggled. And I just would recommend this book to anybody who is looking for something, a book that is more complex than a young adult novel, while you can still understand it. I think that this is really good. It's more complex, but it still is by John Green, so it has the same kind of themes in it than other young adult novels. And yeah, that's why it was so influential to me. It kind of let me branch out, and I think that it's good for anybody who also wants to branch out. So yeah, definitely read this book.